Oliver, you've seen the videos, right? Don says that he's a journalist many times throughout the protest at the church and at the protest throughout the day. Let's just take a listen real quick.
I'm not part of the group. I'm just here photographing. I'm a journalist. So we're here just chronicling and reporting. We're not part of the activists, but we're here just reporting on them. I'm not going to get in the middle of it because I'm not here as an activist. I'm here as a journalist. So I'm just going to be as respectful as possible. I'm not here to intimidate anybody. I'm just here to chronicle and to get some answers. I'm just chronicling. I'm not with the group.
Whose team are you on? Come on, man.
This is Don Lemon.
Oliver, you've seen the videos there. What is your take on what's happened here? You know, Don clearly establishing himself as a journalist, saying that he's not part of the group. He's also part of new media, right? And not that the rules are different, but it is sort of a new factor in all this. Explain to me what you're seeing in the video.
Yeah, I think we should be very clear about what's happening here. This is an escalation of Donald Trump's attacks on the press. It started with Donald Trump diminishing the press as fake news. It escalated to him calling the press the enemy of the people. It escalated even further to him filing absurd and meritless lawsuits against news organizations as president. And now you're seeing him, a couple weeks ago, the federal government raided a Washington Post reporter. And now you're seeing him deploy federal agents to arrest a critic in Don Lemon after two courts basically said that there is insufficient evidence to do so. And what is happening here is this is part of a larger effort by Donald Trump to weaponize the federal government to go after perceived critics, whether it's journalists, whether it's universities, or whether it's law firms. And I think we should be very clear about that abuse of power that he's exercising right now as commander-in-chief.
Rob, your take on what you've seen in the video.
Well, what Oliver forgot to mention there was that this was a grand jury's decision. So ultimately, as Don Lemon even acknowledged, let's see how this plays out in the court of law. Tom, I would say let's stop calling it a protest. It was an invasion of a church service. Those people had the right to worship Jesus Christ, which they were doing. And Don Lemon was part of the group, premeditated outside of that protest. You didn't play the video, but Don Lemon was meeting with some of the organizers and the activists and had advanced knowledge of this. He was not wearing any sort of press badge. And by the way, Don Lemon was hardly the only person in that church who had a camera out and was documenting the event. So what makes Don Lemon any different from anybody else who could call themselves part of the media?
Actually, Rob, we do have that video. Let's play that clip you're talking about right now.
This is an operation that is secret, that they invited folks out. Can't tell you what is going to happen, but you're going to watch it live unfold here on the Don Lemon Show.
Rob, that's the image you're talking about. Oliver, I want to go back to you. Listen, journalists get tipped off on things all the time. Law enforcement leak things to the media. Protesters leak things to the media. The question here is, did Don Lemon cross a line? That's the question here, Oliver.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, Tom, so I'll leave it to the lawyers to hash that out. I can tell you that this administration doesn't seem to care much about the law. If they did, they wouldn't have pardoned, the president would have pardoned all the January 6th protesters who were, quite literally invading the U.S. Capitol and disrupting the transfer of power. And this is obviously a selective targeting. I don't even think Rob would deny that Don Lemon has gotten under Trump's skin. He's wanted to go after him for a while. This is pretty obviously him targeting Don Lemon as a critic here. And, you can even go with the FACE Act. The FACE Act, I believe this president has pardoned people who were convicted of violating that law. So it seems that the administration is wielding the law in a different way against critics, and I think that's pretty clear.
I want to get back to Don, but Oliver, I do want to ask you, because you're sort of in this unique position to answer this question. Everyone has a phone now in their hands, right? And everyone can launch a podcast, they can launch a blog, they can be on Instagram, on TikTok, they can be a journalist, right? There are citizen journalists. Is there a line drawn on who's a journalist and who's not a journalist, do you think, in this day and age?
I think it's very tough. I do think it's very tough in this day and age because, like you said, everyone has a phone, everyone can document something, and the term journalist is pretty broad. I think in Don Lemon's sense, though, given that he has had, a 30-plus year career, he was a top anchor at CNN, I think it'd be very difficult to say that he is not a journalist. I think you could, if the federal government were to make the argument against, say, some average Joe who took out his phone and posted to Twitter, I think that might, you might still be able to classify them as a journalist, but it'd be a tougher argument to make probably in court, given that Don
Yeah.
Lemon is a very established name, an established journalist, I think it's pretty clear he was acting as a journalist here.
With that type of defense on that point, Misty, talk to me about that. We do know that Don Lemon is a journalist. He has a show. It's on YouTube. He has subscribers. He's been in the media for decades. Will the First Amendment protect him here?
Yeah, that's going to be the argument. And part of that is going to be what the prosecution would have to establish, which is an intent element, that the intent was to engage in an activity that would prohibit freedom of expression. So we're going to be looking at his mindset, which is going to speak to what's his purpose. Well, is it journalistic? This is an issue of public interest. And I think, listen, he's represented by Abby Lowell. That's a high-profile lawyer. I think what you're going to see next is a request for a preliminary hearing. So remember, an indictment, that's a prosecutorial process. A preliminary hearing, you go before a judge. It's like a mini trial where probable cause needs to be established. Knowing that the prosecutors had already gone to two judges before and had been denied probable cause for a warrant, then went to a grand jury, I think strategically, you'll likely see a lot of these arguments play out pretty early in the process.
Rob, I do want to go back to you because you brought up a great point in the beginning of all this, and this can't be sort of lost in this conversation. I have two questions for you. The second one you can answer later, which is there's so much going on in this country right now. Does the DOJ want to focus on resources on prosecuting Don Lemon? That's the second question. But the initial question I do want to ask, people do have a right to worship. There should be a safe place in this country where you can go and you can worship whomever your God is. And these people clearly were there for a church service and it was disrupted. And that can't be lost in this conversation either.
No, that's a great point, Tom. Thank you for bringing that up. And we know from the 40 or so people who came in and invaded that church that children felt terrorized. There was a woman who broke her arm. The pastor apparently repeatedly asked Don Lemon and the individuals who were there to leave, and they didn't. Don Lemon at one point, I think, was even blocking the door and preventing people from exiting the church. And so I think there's a whole number of factors that the DOJ and others will have to look at, obviously, as they pursue this. And to go back to another point that Oliver made, I agree that Don Lemon probably doesn't have many fans at the Department of Justice or within the Trump administration. But I'd also point out that this is not something that a Republican or a Democrat necessarily would do. It was during the Biden administration when the Daily Signal had its press credentials revoked by the White House. And so, this is something that I don't think you can pinpoint just because it's Donald Trump.
Do you think it's worth it with everything going on in the country and the world that the DOJ is going after Don Lemon and another independent journalist who were out there that day?
Well, one thing you consistently see with this administration is the fact that they want to hold people accountable. And I think that they feel that too many times in the past, individuals like Don Lemon did not have that level of accountability. So I think they're trying to set an example here.
Oliver, you don't think this is the end? You think there continues to be investigations, grand jury indictments possibly in the future for journalists?
Unfortunately, I think we're seeing the beginning of this administration going after journalists. I think they're only going to be more emboldened. This is only 1 year of Donald Trump's administration. We have 3 more years left. And, I'm a little bit baffled by what Rob is saying. He's complaining about the Daily Signal's press credentials being taken away, which I'm not sure what happened there, but I agree they should be able to cover any administration. But seems to be cheering on Don Lemon being arrested. That doesn't really seem to add up, and be consistent there. So.
We didn't invade a church.
We
didn't disrupt the service. I mean, we were simply there in the White House press briefing room trying to cover the president. I think it's two completely different situations.
We're going to have to leave it there. Rob, Oliver, Misty, so great to have you. We could spend the whole hour on this. We have other news. It's been a very busy news day. I thank you all for your time and your analysis tonight. We'll continue covering this story.